So today we're going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We are now in episode 91 of the series, and in the previous episode we saw a ton of very important things happening, especially for the lore of the series. So if you are super interested in like the lore and the overall story of this series, I highly recommend you watch episode 90 because it has huge implications for the later episodes. But other than that, we saw a few other things happening, such as Red Australia's expansion further into the Philippine Islands. We saw Mesopotamia unite with the Purple Team. There was a lot of changes for some of the alliances across the world, but the most important thing that we saw was the war that broke out between Russia and the Mesopotamian countries. The Square Team and the 3-Point Star Alliance are officially at war after Russia declared war on Caucasia. So if you guys do enjoy today's episode, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. All the support is as always greatly appreciated. The 200,000 subscriber merchandise is out, link for that down in the description below. We have a ton of designs including the WICSO merch. But let's go ahead and jump straight into this video. So picking up exactly where we left off, we have Caucasian forces being very overwhelmed by Russian forces. However, reinforcements from the other Mesopotamian countries have arrived and they are now pushing back the Russians. Due to the fact that the Mesopotamian military alliance was unknown, Russia has inadequate forces in this area, and thus they are going to be very overwhelmed by the Mesopotamian forces, which are now crossing over deep into their territory. The Mesopotamians will quickly move to capture this major city over here near the coast of the Sea of Azov, while over here in the eastern region they will also take over this major city here and reach the border of the Teal Team, who is an ally of Russia and participating in this conflict. After these few major cities are captured, even more Mesopotamian troops are sent in, and an entire front line emerges as they start to march towards these other major cities. They'll easily be able to take over this one over here as well as this one over here, but that's when the Russian forces finally lock in and their reinforcements arrive, which is going to put a halt to the Mesopotamian advance. Russia will put an emphasis on freeing the land up over here near the Sea of Azov, so they will move down and recapture this major city and also encircle a ton of Mesopotamian troops over here. Quickly they'll move in and either eliminate them or take them captive, and as they start to move closer to the border of Caucasia, once again we see a stalemate breaking out. Back up north though, there is a little bit of progress on the side of the Mesopotamians as their forces move up and are approaching this major city, and on top of that their forces have now crossed the border over into the Teal Team and are heading straight towards their capital city. Now Russia notably isn't really helping out their allies here because they didn't think that it would get this serious this quickly, so there aren't a whole ton of Russian troops over here, if any. And what that means is, well, this capital city is going to be very easily captured. Mesopotamian forces very easily overwhelm the Teal Team. They lose their capital city, but they're not going to lose their country because they still have a lot of cities to go. But things are quickly about to change with the entrance of the Pink Team temporarily into the 3-Point Star Mesopotamian alliance. Now this really shouldn't be too much of a surprise. The Pink Team has been pretty bullied by Russia in their history, or more so their recent history. Of course, they used to be a Russian ally, but things have changed greatly since then. And they're actually a little bit more like Western aligned. Now I know that we don't really have, Westernism in this world per se, but they're more closely aligned with like the countries in the Atlantic, like Western Europe and America at this point, so actually pretty similar to Westernism in real life, but that concept really hasn't emerged here. Anyway, the Pink Team was successful in taking this major city here, but the Mesopotamian countries will tell the Pink Team to mainly focus on the Teal Team due to the fact that they can handle Russia and they don't want them to, overexpend their forces. This is a very large area over here, so instead, how about you focus on these smaller countries so we don't have to, and we'll deal with the much larger threat. So that is their agreement, and the Pink Team will move troops into the Teal Team, heading straight towards these two major cities down here. Now, the strength of all of the Mesopotamian countries together is more than Russia, but even so, Russia is a very strong country. They're a top 10 power, and their military is one of the strongest militaries in the world, so they're going to have success in some of their counteroffensives that they carry out. However, these counteroffensives only push back the Mesopotamians for a little bit because once again, overall, they have the military advantage, and every time they're pushed back, they come back a little bit stronger. So the border could look like this, and then Russia pulls off a counteroffensive. However, once the Mesopotamians push back, they are now capturing this major city, pushing the front line way further forward. This is a common trend that we see throughout this war. The Mesopotamians take a bunch of land, the Russians have a counteroffensive, and then the Mesopotamians come back and they take extra land just like they did there. They now reach completely over to the Sea of Azov coast, cutting off all Russian forces and making them surrender or die. And now they push north, heading straight towards Ukraine, a very key area. Now, I'm sure we all remember how Russia took out the Gold Team team a few episodes ago, and they also took a big old chunk out of Poland. While everyone else in Russia is pretty happy, even a lot of the Russians over here who were not a part of the original formation of the Russian Empire, like, they were still Russian at the end of the day, so it's not like they're super alienated. Whereas different ethnicities or groups, such as the Ukrainians, aren't going to really mesh into this new Russian idea so well. Remember how I said the Russians are like partying, you know, like things couldn't be better? Well, that's not necessarily true for all of the people here, especially people who are not Russian, like, once again, the Ukrainians. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, Russian forces will pull off a massive counteroffensive over here against the pink team. It does a ton of damage to them, and they're able to push back all of the pink team occupiers. Now, what we don't see happening is Russian forces entering into the teal team to help them out, and that's probably for the best because Russia can't really waste any of their forces, especially with what's happening over here. So the pink team will be able to take those two major cities, and they'll even meet up with Mesopotamian troops, cutting the teal team into two pieces. This part up here will be occupied by the pink team while they keep fighting down south. At this point, the Mesopotamians will move further into this region as to allow for their ally to breathe a little bit. You know, they know the pink team is relatively vulnerable to Russia here, so they want to make it so that they can hold on to this land and then it doesn't instantly fall back over to Russian forces if they wanted to. So they send some divisions over here, they capture these two major cities, and that will allow for a little bit of a stronger hold in this specific region. So far, not so good for Russia. They are being overwhelmed, and the Mesopotamian forces are slowly but surely creeping their way up towards mainland Russia. Now though, this war is about to take a very dramatic turn. Yet another country will be joining in on Mesopotamia's alliance once again temporarily, but this country is none other than the Farmers' Republic. This country shares very close ties to Mesopotamia as a region. Historically, they have always been super close, very close allies. The Farmers' Republic is the Mesopotamia as France is to the United States in real life, and these guys really don't like the Russians either, so like there's no reason for them not to join, especially if they want to reclaim lost lands that were over here. So FR troops will move out from their border and they will instantly start to occupy Russian land. They'll capture two major cities within the first couple of weeks, but eventually they are halted by a much larger Russian force, but they don't necessarily push back. Instead, the Russians just kind of stand there for a little bit, and it's kind of confusing because, you know, you have the manpower to overwhelm the Farmers' Republic, but you're not choosing to do so. So what's going on there? I don't know. But anyway, the Mesopotamian countries are still advancing in the Russian territory, and now they are reaching Ukrainian major cities, and this is going to start something within Russia's territory. First though, a counteroffensive over here near the pink team is going to distract the Mesopotamians a little bit. Remember, they want to make sure the pink team is fine, so they're going to send reinforcements over to this region, which inadvertently allows for the Russians to have another counteroffensive, this time going down and capturing this major city deep into Mesopotamian occupation. They also start to round towards this major city as well, but quickly Mesopotamian troops will work to push back against this counteroffensive, securing their area over here. Quickly back over to the front line with the teal team and the pink team. Orange team forces are now on the border and are helping out their ally, so they will have a slight counteroffensive, one that is good enough to retake this major city here and reach the border of the pink team. But it is eventually stalemated once again, and we even see pink team forces immediately re-enter into this country, so not really much of a counteroffensive, but it does retake one major city, so it can be seen as a success. But now we're going to see one of the alliances in this war gain another member, but this time it's not the Mesopotamian alliance. Instead, Russia gains an ally. In fact, they gain two. Firstly, we see the orange team join Russia's alliance, and secondly, and most shockingly, we see Greece join Russia's alliance. This is a complete shock to the whole world because Greece is known as this very democratic country, very friendly country in most cases. However, when it comes to Mesopotamia, Greece is a little bit more serious. Greece endured old Empyrean occupation for a very long time, and they do not like the fact that these countries are all working together as one solid military, and they especially don't like the fact that they are pretty much pummeling the only opponent they have near them right now. I mean, sure, India is right here, and they're way stronger than Russia, but they don't border them, they don't have any hostilities with India. In fact, if anything, the Mesopotamian countries have become a lot more friendly with India since the coalition of the willing, and Greece recognizes that. They know that India won't have any say in stopping Mesopotamian expansion, so they were kind of putting their hopes into Russia, but seeing how this is going not well, they decide that even though it's against their morals and their ethics, they're going to join the war on the side of the authoritarian countries. Greco-Russian relations are pretty neutral, maybe a little bit hostile, but there is a bigger enemy in this war. And so Bulgarian and Greek forces will cross the border over into the Farmers' Republic, catching them completely by surprise, taking three major cities, moving up the coastal areas areas, and also almost completely occupying their capital city. They take around half of it, but the Farmers Republic holds on for now. They're going to await Mesopotamian reinforcements, which are probably not going to get there too soon because the Black Sea is an absolute battle zone between the Mesopotamian navies, between the Greek and Russian navies. It's just a complete mess here. So those reinforcements, they might take a while to get here. But once again, the world is just kind of shocked by this. Greece teaming up with an authoritarian country in the name of defeating Mesopotamia, and also maybe the Farmers Republic. These two haven't really gotten along in history. But at this very point in time, the world is just a very confusing place with the whole Singularity Testament meeting that happened and just like the threat of an external force coming. The world has kind of like let go in a very small way. Like they know the world could very well end soon. So it's just kind of like, it's set this precedent in a lot of people's minds that like, you know what, screw it, whatever, let's just do it. Like, you know, we don't know how long left we have to live. It's kind of like that mentality. Anyway, back over here, the Mesopotamians will once again push back against the Russian counteroffensive. They still have the upper hand in this war, and they're going to take 2 more major cities. And they're even going to cross over into Crimea and begin to take land over here, and this will spark something to finally happen. With the presence of Mesopotamian troops in Crimea, finally we see the Ukrainian People's Front open up. No, they are not communist, that is just their name. But this rebellion will begin to gain ground in the southernmost regions of Russia over here in the Ukrainian region, and they will start to work with the Mesopotamians to push back the Russians. They will take over the entire area around the Sea of Azov, and they'll move up into these other Ukrainian cities that were also, fun fact, Old Empyrean at one point. There's also a lot of nuking and a lot of fighting that happened in this region, so you know there's a lot of history right now, and both the Russians and the Mesopotamians are feeling it. However, the Farmers Republic is going to be feeling something a lot worse here in a second, as Russian forces completely push back all of their advancing troops. And on top of that, Russian forces have also started to enter into the country, just in this one particular area. They don't really go past that though. Russia kind of wants to leave this to just the Greeks and the Bulgarians. They don't really want to spend a whole lot of time there because there is, once again, a much larger issue. But now, even more countries are going to be involved in this war. Russia has secretly been building influence in a specific region, and now things are starting to make sense. Russia has been prioritizing building relations with this specific region, which includes countries like Bulgaria and Greece, who are already in Russia's temporary alliance, but also countries like this one and that one. Okay, maybe I should make names for these countries. North Anatolia and South Anatolia. And Russia is going to promise these countries something. They're going to promise them a ton of land from Mesopotamia, and that's good enough for them. These guys, like I've said many times already, have grown distant from the other Mesopotamian countries, so they don't really feel that connection like these guys over here do. So they join the war, and this is going to open up another front, one that the 3-Point Star Alliance was definitely not expecting. Their forces will move first over into the light blue country over here, taking their capital city and almost immediately knocking them out of the war. And we will also see Lime Team forces move out into red Mesopotamian territory, taking over 2 major cities and starting an advance towards their capital as they bolster most of their forces in this region to go down to this extremely populated area. They will also successfully take over the northern part of Cyprus. However, the forces here will hold out for now. But with the distraction in the south, Russia will pull off a very impressive counteroffensive that retakes about 4 total major cities. As you can see here, most of them are in the Ukrainian region, which is going to crush the morale of this rebellion, and they will be pushed back as well, losing 2 of their major cities. And all of a sudden, the pendulum has started to swing in the favor of the square team in this war, as the Mesopotamians scramble to try to fix this new issue. Mesopotamian forces will stop advancing on all fronts, which leads to the Russians being able to start to push back across the entire front line. And the only place we really don't see the square team start to suffer loss is over here in the teal team, where the pink team is still having a very good time. Could have worded that better, but you know, we ball. They now reach very deep into this country and are super close to the border of the orange team. Now though, they might have to start worrying about something else though, because this specific area is being targeted by the Russians. They will meet all the way down to the original border of the teal team, pushing back both Mesopotamian and pink team forces as they begin to liberate most of this area. There will be a slight holdout in the capital city by Mesopotamian forces that are trapped there, but Russia is once again focusing on this specific area over here. So things not going so well for the 3-Point Star Alliance anymore. They had a ton of momentum when this war started, but like I've said, the pendulum has swung back towards the side of the square team. The Farmers Republic has just lost their capital city over to Bulgarian and Greek forces as they meet up with Russian forces, which are stationed over here in this major city. One very large army group is separated from the rest of the country, and they will try to fight as best as they can. However, they will fall back to this major city here and hope to withhold as long as they can. But I think it's about time that someone joins this war. Someone that you all think should have already been in this war, I'm sure. That country is Poland. Poland is going to want their revenge, and they will join the war on the side of the Mesopotamian countries. So this also shouldn't really be too much of a surprise. Poland, as we all know, suffered defeat from Russia a few episodes ago. They lost their ally in Ukraine. That sucked. No one really looked like they were going to be able to stop Russia, but now this war is an opportune time for Poland not only to bring back all of their old lands, but to also beat back Russia and maybe even regain their ally in Ukraine. So Polish forces, who are fueled purely off of vodka and revenge, will cross the border and begin to take land from Russia. This is not Russian land. This is Polish land, and they make that very clear. They are often welcomed with open arms in these major cities they begin to liberate, and Russia more likely than not foresaw Poland joining this war, especially after the Mesopotamian countries got involved. It's just more so like, this is way too much, way too fast for Russia to really, prepare for another country to join, specifically over here. So like maybe when the Farmers Republic joined the war unexpectedly, they moved all their forces that were on the border of Poland down to them to deal with that. So they're all right here, which left this area vulnerable. Russia wasn't able to reinforce it because they were too busy reinforcing down here. So this is like the perfect time for Poland to strike, and they have done just that. Their success is very extraordinary, and Russia is going to have to start sending forces over here as well. More specifically, they'll pull the forces that are in the Farmers Republic out, which leads to them regaining a little bit of land, but most of it goes over to the Orange team. And those forces will now start to fight back against Polish forces, reaching back to their border, but not really pushing them back up in the north, where they are at a disadvantage. Poland actually has the numbers right now. They have more manpower than Russia does in this region, so if Russia wants to stop Poland's advance, they're going to have to pull troops from somewhere else, but that really might not be an option. So Poland will continue to expand, but more specifically up here in the north in the Baltic region. These major cities will all go over to Polish occupation, which will set up kind of like a solid defensive front line with all of these major cities here. But now we come back down to Crimea, where Mesopotamia will pull all of their forces out, and they will relinquish that control over to the Ukrainian rebels, who will get folded. They fall back to Crimea, and they blow up the bridge again, and Russia is unable to enter for now, so the Ukrainian rebels will hold out here. Russia is, however, still pushing back the Mesopotamians in this region, this most western area over here, as they're now getting pretty close to the border of Caucasia. However, over here, Mesopotamian forces are once again pushing back Russian forces as they are moving out and mobilizing into these two major cities over here. Mesopotamian forces also take complete control over the panhandle of the Teal team, and they will begin to move forces out from there, aiding out the Pink team and helping them kind of distract any Russian forces that might have been trying to go into this area. So the Pink team is still once again only focused on this, and Mesopotamia is kind of protecting them while they do that. But the main focus has completely shifted for these guys. Of course, they want to hold their front line up here in Russia, but there is a much more threatening thing down here. And, well, they're sending their forces straight after these Turkish countries, and these Turkish countries, well, they don't stand much of a chance at all. Mesopotamian forces will now enter into core Green Team territory, and they will start to rapidly approach the capital city of the Green Team. They are being very, very quickly overwhelmed, and so much so, they lose that capital city within only a few weeks of the Red Team crossing over into their territory. Maybe like 2 weeks max. That's how fast they got there. The military of Mesopotamia, when it works together, is one of the best militaries in the world. It far outranks Russia's military in both manpower and technology, but it isn't necessarily on the same level as like India's military, for example. So India is a good comparison in this war, I guess, showing that this region and Russia, they're strong on their own, but not as strong as this independently. Together though, Mesopotamia and Russia could, very easily take out India, but that's never going to happen. They're literally killing each other right now. Anyway, Mesopotamia's new focus on the Anatolian region will lead to them helping out their ally in the Teal team. They will actually be able to retake their capital city, and all of the Yellow team's forces will be pushed out of this country. Now, for the most part, it is the Red team fighting over here. The Caucasian country, as well as the Blue team and the Pink team down here, are setting their forces up to Russia. And like I said, it's the Red team over here, as well as actually Palestine helping them out in this region. And it's going to continue to go well. The Red team is now utilizing their navy to carry out deep strikes within their territory, targeting military military bases and stuff like that. The Mesopotamians have a very clear naval advantage in this area. Of course, Greece isn't going to send their navy down there because they're sending their navy to die if they do that. So that is a big reason as to why we see the red team have so much success here as they take out and occupy almost all of the green team except for over here, while Greek forces have kind of came in and backed them up. Now the focus over here will also shift to invading the yellow team. So this isn't necessarily just the teal team doing that because they couldn't do this. This is also their allies helping them out. So red team, blue team, so on and so forth. They are now invading into this territory of the yellow team. And it is going very well as well. Very well as well. We love the English language. Anyway, their capital city will be taken as well, and the Anatolian countries are very quickly, almost completely out of this war. Very disappointing for Russia, who had hoped that this distraction would maybe last a little bit longer, and maybe wouldn't even be a distraction in the first place. But as it turns out, that is exactly what these countries did. They were just a distraction. There was no long-term benefit for them joining the war, and the momentum starts to shift once again in the favor of Mesopotamia. And this is especially apparent with the entrance of yet another country into their alliance, and as it turns out, this is another country that has close ties with Mesopotamia, or has historically had close ties with Mesopotamia. This country is none other than the nation of Norway, who joins the war on the side of the 3-Point Star Alliance, on the side of Poland, on the side of the Farmers Republic, their former allies, and they will mostly be focusing on Finland and helping out Poland in the northern front over here. Now, Norway and Finland are very close countries. I don't know if I've really elaborated that effort. I think I've said it before, but these two nations have very close relations. Of course, we saw that Norway recently flipped over into Finland's ideology of Scandinavian socialism. That brought the economies of both of these countries together, but diplomatically, they've always been close. And when Finland was being invaded by Russia, Norway actually was considering joining the war on their side to help them out. They just did not go through with it because they couldn't get any other countries to join. Norway helping out Finland wouldn't have been enough. They still would have been overwhelmed, so they wanted to get another country. It's just that no other country was interested. Now though, they can help out their old ally, and they will send troops over into that old ally. So the Finnish military will welcome them with hostility. However, the people living here will welcome the Norwegians with care, with trust, with open arms. They're friendly towards them, and the Norwegian military instantly starts to fold the puppet state of Finland. It was not a very strong puppet state because Russia took all of like the valuable land over here. So like there's really nothing else going on anywhere else in this country. And after Norway secures the entirety of like the central region, this area will not necessarily surrender because it's a puppet state. Russia wouldn't allow it to do that. And it also won't come under Norwegian occupation, but for the sake of funny color on map and not having a random pink spot up here, we're going to say that Norway has capitulated the puppet state of Finland, and thus they get full occupation, even though they definitely don't have forces up here in like the Cold Peninsula. They do, however, have forces going into Russia, and the entire Norwegian military is focused on this area. They actually don't have any troops within their own territory, which is very risky, but both the Norwegian and Polish navies will be working together to keep the Russian navy at bay, which they do have the advantage. It's just that Russia is fighting a 4-front war now, maybe even a 5-front war, so they're just kind of like, you know, very disorganized. It's all of these countries coming at them at once. This is like the buildup. This is what happens when you expand too aggressively and you don't try to mend relations with the countries that hate you, and it's coming back to bite Russia now. With Norway's distraction in the north, Poland will have even more success in the Baltic region as they take over the rest of Latvia and even push all the way up into Estonia, cutting off some Russian forces that are stranded over here. But Poland is doing a ton of work in this war. Their contribution cannot be understated. Back down in the Farmers Republic, the military that was holding out in this city finally falls over to Orange Team forces, who are also rapidly advancing into this country and cutting it into two pieces once again. We now have 2 major cities over here and only 1 over here. The Farmers Republic is very close to just straight up surrendering. They pretty much have capitulated at this point, but they haven't necessarily surrendered yet. Anyway, over here to the pink team, they will now completely occupy the teal team, and they will start to send forces over into the orange country down here. Now, these countries are not very strong at all. The pink team is stronger than both of them combined, so it's not surprising that we finally see this front line starting to fall in favor of the 3-Point Star Alliance. And we also see good signs for this 3-Point Star Alliance over here, as Mesopotamian forces are now on the advance once again. Russian forces are now kind of disorganized and all over the place with the other countries joining, and Mesopotamia will take complete advantage of that, now moving back into these cities that they previously occupied. The pink team will now cut the orange team off completely from the Caspian Sea, and it's here that we see this country actually surrender over to the 3-point star alliance. So Russia loses 2 allies very quickly, and now the pink team is going to be sending their forces into this area of Russia, which is not a good thing. Another front has opened up. And like many of the other fronts in this war, this particular advance is being fueled by the desire for not only vodka, but also revenge. Back up north, Norwegian forces will continue to move into Russian territory. There is actually very little presence of Russian military over here, and they're mostly caught up with Poland now. They're having a lot of counteroffensive forces stationed right here, but they're dealing with the pink team, the red team now, the Ukrainian rebels. It's just like, there's so many fronts for Russia to manage. They just haven't really had time to focus on this one, and it's starting to bite them as Norwegian forces are now right here. Like, they're right there, and your capital city is right there. Polish forces are not far, and even to an extent, Mesopotamian forces aren't super far. Now though, down here, we will see the orange team successfully occupy this area of the Farmers Republic, and they'll even start to move further into this area. However, they will be stopped by Polish forces, who are now going to start to help out their ally in the Farmers Republic. Not a whole ton, you know, Greek forces are here and they're kind of hard to push back against, so it's not like a super large counteroffensive, but it's enough to retake this major city here. But unfortunately, Poland has to worry about another counteroffensive, this time coming from the enemy of Russia, who is blitzing straight towards their territory. They push back all of Poland's occupational forces in this area of the front line. It is a very bad military failure for the Polish forces. However, they do still hold on up here, and they even take out the rest of Estonia. So Russia does seem to want to protect this area in particular. Every time a country gets close to it, they start to bolster their forces and push them back, but that strategy probably won't work for too long, especially as Russia begins to run out of not only manpower, but also resources. This is one of the most populated countries in the world. They have a ton of people to throw at you, but Russia isn't like super duper populated. It's probably about as is in real life if all these areas were united, which is still a lot, not as much as this area in this universe as well. And then you have the counter in the blue team, all of Caucasia. Poland's very populated, so is Norway, so the 3-point star alliance has the overall manpower advantage. They also have the military technology advantage. And when you're down in that many fronts for the square team, it's just not sustainable. You don't really have anything to fall back on, and that's what we're seeing now. Now, Norway is going to stop their advance into Russian territory any further, and instead they will focus on occupying all of this area of Finland. So they take over all of Finland's previous land, and that was like their stated goal in this war. So they're not going to expand much further beyond this unless it's absolutely necessary. Instead, they will stay in the war, and they will just hold on to Finland in order to like demand that in the peace treaty. Like, you can't like not give us Finland back because Norway is completely occupying all of it. That's the logic there. Anyway, the Ukrainian rebellion will do something a little bit risky. They're going to leave Crimea and they're going to cross the bridge and go out into their old territory once again. And this actually doesn't go too horrible for them. They're able to take back one major city, but that's about it, as they are now met up with Russian forces and stopped from advancing any further. Now, back over here in Anatolia, we see that the Mesopotamian countries are now completely occupying all of the Anatolian countries, and even more so, we're seeing these troops now cross over into Greek territory, which is going to be very threatening for them. They have been mostly focused on the Farmers Republic and now Poland, but with the Mesopotamians now taking over the city of Istanbul or Constantinople, which it's not called that, but there is still a city here. The alarm will sound in Greece, like there's a much bigger threat now. We have to stop focusing over here, and we're gonna have to put all of our manpower into this. The armies that are here are already enough to challenge that of Greece's armies, so they want to be extra careful here. They will still be kicked all the way out of Anatolia, but they will hold a defensive over here near Constantinople, and they will not allow for the Mesopotamians to cross over into Europe. But with the 3-point star alliance no longer having to worry about this front line over here, you know, they're not going to try to push into Greece because there's no need to. The main threat is Russia. They'll now take a majority of the offensive troops that are stationed here and put them back on this front line. And oh boy, is it going to be bad for Russia. They haven't had a fight against the full Mesopotamian army in a long time, you know, ever since these guys joined the war. And in that time frame, Russia has been fighting other front lines. They've been losing manpower. They've been deteriorating in the equipment and resource department, and that is now coming back to bite them fully, as Mesopotamia has taken the 2 major cities that are on the outskirts of their capital city. There is this like kind of network of major cities here that surround the capital city. They're not super close to the capital city, so they're not like the suburbs or anything like that, but it's probably a part of like the metropolitan area. But yeah, the Mesopotamians are right there. And with this front line now extending all the way up there like this, the Ukrainian rebels will begin to push back, and they will retake 3 major cities this time, and their rebellion starts to pick up momentum as a lot of the people in these cities start to rise up against the Russian occupiers. And Ukraine is now an actual country in this war. They have reestablished their government, they are back, and they too want revenge. It's just that like this country is completely destroyed by the war, and they don't have any resources or manpower, so they're probably going to take a backseat to this. Anyway, Polish forces are taking advantage of this as well. They're now taking back these major cities, but more so they're helping out the Farmers Republic push back against the Orange team, who is now pretty much occupying this area by themselves as Greece prepares for Mesopotamia, who, as we know, isn't coming. So bad speculation there by the Square team. It allows for the Polish forces to help out the Farmers Republic, take back and reestablish their country. Also, Pink team is just rolling through this area. There is absolutely nothing happening over here because Russia has little to no forces over here. They're now all near the capital city trying to protect that. And, well, the Spearhead has officially formed and it's going straight there. With the forces being so close to the capital city, the Russian dictator is going to start to panic because their little empire that they formed is all of a sudden starting to come crashing down. This region down here is the owner of this region up here, apparently. That's not necessarily true. They kind of destroy each other whenever they get the chance. But he will demand the military in this region to focus on stopping the Mesopotamians, which is not the greatest of ideas because the order was to only focus on the Mesopotamians and not the Polish, who have been very closely monitoring the moves of the Russian dictator, trying to figure out what he's going to demand next, what he's going to order his military to do next. They caught whiff of that, and they're now sending their forces straight to the capital city as well, which is a little bit vulnerable on this side and very protected on this side. So as Polish forces begin to approach, Russia will move their military around, allowing for the Mesopotamians to also push back and towards their capital city. So the Spearhead once again starts to form, and the Russian dictator is like, it's over. Of course, he doesn't publicly say that because that would incite panic in his people, and all of a sudden their military would start to degrade. But deep down inside, he knows that this war is cooked. He probably should not have declared war on the Caucasian country, and even more so, he shouldn't have brought all of these other countries into the war, because now Mesopotamia is going to gain probably land and also way more influence in the Baltic Sea area. Russia's influence will be gone if they even still exist. Farmers Republic forces will retake their capital city, and at that point, the Russian dictator realizes that it's probably time to call it quits. And just as the Mesopotamians reach the gates of the capital city, the dictator of Russia will call for the leaders of all participating countries to meet over here in the capital of the Dutch team, where, as he says, they will negotiate peace terms of this war. That's right. Russia will surrender over to the 3-Point Star Alliance, and the dictator knows that he is on his way out. He knows that he will no longer be the ruler of his people. He knows that Russia is probably going to become a democratic country, so in his speech to the public in front of all of Russia, he will tell his people that he is surrendering for them. He doesn't want this empire that he has built to all of a sudden just crumble and disappear. He wants it to be sustained. He wants it to last. He wants his people to have a strong enough country that is able to repel any outside aggression, even though Russia usually is the aggressor. But he wants a united Russian state, one that is strong, one that isn't fractured like Russia has been for the course of a few decades now, like with the HRE and stuff like that. So that is why he is surrendering, and the people here will cherish him for that. He's not going to go down in history as some evil dictator. He's going to go down as someone that stood for the Russian people, someone that made life better in Russia, and when the end time came, he is someone that put his country over him. He didn't keep fighting for his own sake. He stopped fighting for the sake of his people. Now, though, he is meeting over here in the capital city of the Dutch Republic, and we can take a look at the peace treaty between the Square team and the 3-Point Star Alliance. And in this peace treaty here, we see that Russia loses a ton of land, and not only do they lose a lot of land, but so do some of their allies. So starting off with Russia itself, they will be forced to spit out a ton of countries, such as Estonia, who makes their re-entrance for like the 50th time in the series. Finland will be spat out completely, and they will be given independence, so they are now their own country again, picking up where they left off before they were invaded and occupied. We also see that they're forced to spit out the entirety of the Gold Team / Ukraine, as well as, first of all, this old Imperial nation here, as well as these two Russian nations over here. Now, Russia didn't actually lose a lot of their core territory here. Now, they did lose a lot of of land, but that was like foreign land that they had conquered and occupied and annexed. Their actual core territory is still relatively untouched, specifically like in this area here. This is where the most Russians are. These areas are Russian over here, but they're Eastern Russian, and they don't necessarily super identify with this area over here because of historical tensions. But aside from Russia itself, we see that Poland gets all of their land back, so they are restored to their full glory. The Farmers Republic actually does gain land from this, so they get land from Russia. This actually used to be that brown country that was here, but they no longer exist, and they're now just split between them, Russia, and the gold team, which we'll get to that here in a second. But on top of getting land from Russia, the Farmers Republic will also take over a ton of land from the orange team, as well as a little bit of land from the Greeks over here, so they now extend down the Black Sea coast a little bit more, and the Farmers Republic is looking pretty good. Now, Greece themselves, they're not really going to get any punishments from this war. They're going to lose the land to the Farmers Republic, as well as this section right here. We'll get to that in a second as well, but they don't get any like reparations or anything like that. They're just kicked out of the war. They give them the big old middle finger. They're like, don't do it again. Now, over to Mesopotamia, this is where we're going to see a majority of the land gains from the war. So the red team will now annex all of this land from the green team, and the teal team will annex all of this land from the yellow team, and this land from the green team. So they become a very large country, pretty much doubling in size. And then something very interesting is going to happen for the rest of the Anatolian countries here. Their governments will be gotten rid of, and they will be forced into one united state, which is the purpose of this blue color here. So that Greek land and these two countries will all unite into one new country that will be aligned with the Mesopotamians. So the red team is trying to get their influence back over here, and this will pretty much do it, as they're going to install a pro-Mesopotamian government in this country. Now, we already saw that Ukraine is back, but they will be getting this additional land from Russia that was also a part of the former brown team, which no longer exists, and like I said, has been divided up between everyone around it. And then finally heading over here to Central Asia, we don't have too many changes happening here other than the pink team restoring all of their old land. So just to give you an idea, this is what the old map looked like and what the old pink team looked like. They're now getting back all of their historical lands, and they're much larger, and in addition to that, they're also getting back the northern part of the teal team, so they become a very large country from this war, probably one of the largest countries in the world. Okay, maybe not one of the largest countries in the world, but still, they're pretty big. Anyway, these two countries right here, we do have to talk about them for a quick second because they are not staying separate. Now, we know that the Eastern Russians don't really align themselves with the actual Central Russian state because of history and all the times that they've been up against these guys, but also these two have been friends with each other for a very long time in that divided history. So these two countries will be united together under one, and as an added bonus, they will get all these provinces from Russia. So they lose a little bit more land, but once again, they still have all of their core territory. They haven't shrunk in that regard. This will be very interesting. Now for capital cities, of course, Ukraine's capital will be where it used to be, so the southernmost region down here. Estonia's capital city will also be restored, as is the gray team's capital, and the new blue team will put their capital city right here, which I believe was the former capital of the yellow country that was here. And then finally for the teal team, we see that they actually did lose their capital city in the peace deal, so they will be relocating it to right here, nicely along the coast of the Caspian Sea, far away from the pink team, who does have their historical capital city back. However, there's really no point in moving it back there because it hasn't been there for a very long time now, and it's also really close to the border of these guys. Oh yeah, and also these guys down here, their capital city will be right here on the coast as well. And then as far as the Assembly of Nations goes, all of these countries will be admitted into it as part of the peace treaty of this war, which is known as the Black Sea War, by the way. But yeah, we're getting to the point now where if you're going to be established as a country, once again, like these guys over here, they're a brand new country, you're going to have to be forced into the AN. It's non-negotiable. You have to join it. In real life, of course, you're not required to join the UN, but here it is because the world believes that it's genuinely beneficial to be in the AN. So if you're not in it, then what are you doing? Also, noticeably, Russia is no longer suspended from the AN, and that's because they were given a new democratic government, one that isn't hell-bent on expansion, and so they're allowed readmittance, so every country is once again represented, other than the terrorist state down here who is still suspended. But yeah, the 3-Point Star Alliance is successful in their war against the Square Team, which no longer exists. The 3-Point Star Alliance, of course, still does. That's Mesopotamia's not so secret anymore military alliance. They also add a new member, which is the new country over here in this part of Anatolia. They also join in on the Economic Alliance, so if we take a quick peek at that, we can see all of the members that are in it. Notably, the Gray Team will rejoin this Economic Alliance as well, so the MEO is as strong as ever. Anyway, that is going to do it for today's episode of What If Civilization Started Over. If you you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. As always, the support is super greatly appreciated as we're trying to grow here on YouTube and reach a much larger audience. Let me know down in the comments below what you liked about this scenario, what you didn't like, were you happy with the outcome of the war, so on and so forth. Leave all that down in the comments below. Make sure to check out the 200k merch limited edition stuff. That's all going away after December 31st. So link to that in the description, link to the Discord server as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Andrew Truno, Apex, Dex Lendy, Sue, Shifty Mapping, Beast the Mapper, Omega the YouTuber, Opie the Bopey, Euroball, Wizo, Rad is totally my Terminator, name. See what I do, AdizzPro, I ain't lying, CTG on Nevada Garbage Trucks, Green France Mapping, Ball Mapping, Ozgeo, a Norwegian, Augusto, Pablo Sigma Cat, GNR95, Zalance, Lizard and Hammer Toad 45. Once again, thank you guys.